Hello. In this lesson, I'd like to talk about the Agility Grid component. And the Agility Grid component is really probably the most popular of all Agility components. And the reason for that is the data fits so nicely into a grid. So we're going to start by talking about the very simplest of grid, what I call the simple grid. And then we're going to expand that into talking about linked list to grids. From there, we're going to talk about different types of filters, which would be user-based filters as well as manual filters. First thing I'm going to look is at the simple, just what I call a simple grid. There's no defined filters at all. It's just a list of data. Now, while the SQL behind an AR aging may be complex, the grid itself is fairly simple. And how would I use that grid? Well, I have subtotals here at the bottom. I might like to do things like sort this by my highest accounts over 90. I can come in here and say I really only want to look at a certain customer. So I have these upper filters. This is a list of all data. And I can use all these different types of filters to drill into that data. I can also do drop-down lists and select data this way as well, if the drop-down lists aren't too extensive. And I can drill into these grids if I define buttons and look at more detail. So to move on from that, the next type of grid I'd like to look at is a grid with a list. This is a bin master, and what I've done is I've listed each bin in the system by location. Let's just look at MA. So we have a simple grid at the top with all the same filters, but I created a linked grid at the bottom. So when I look at bin 200 and I see I have 8,000 over 8,000, I look at the quantity hand of the two items that are in that bin, and I can see that they add up. My layers are in sync. So that's a simple grid with a linked grid, which is going to be a little bit beyond our lesson today, but I'm just showing you how grids advance. Then I have a grid with a filter panel. And if I look at the inventory item master list, I have a different kind of grid. What I've done is I've added a master panel or filter panel at the top. And I'm only looking at rows up to 50. I could make that as many rows as I want. It's persistent. It could be 100. It would always be 100. And in this case, I can drag filters in to this filter up here. Now, the reason I would use this over a filter grid is I may have thousands of SKUs or items, and if I were to try to populate that in a simple grid, it would just be way too much data to bring onto the screen at one time. This allows us to filter against the database. So by using this type of grid, I give the user the control over the filters, so they can just look at purchased items, and they can decide what the filter criteria is. And I'll show you how you can turn a top filter on as part of this lesson. And then last is to try something even more complex, like an OE order status. In this case, I have user-defined filters that are more complex, and I want to look at everything in our system as order lines with an earliest promise date within a certain range, and I have drop-down calendars that I can do for that. I'm going to look at booked and pick ticket printed and partially picked. And this is a much more complex grid because I have filters. As you can see, I also have alerts. Everything here is late. And down below I have linked views as well. So those are the types of grids that we can create, just as an introduction. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video tutorial, and I encourage you to move on to the next video tutorial in this series.